I was struggling. I was in a really bad place.
I found out that I wasn't legally married.
My feelings had died out and I was just suffering in that relationship.
Islamically, he already gave me the 3 talaqs.
I was desperate to get divorced, so Jav's helped us out a lot.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Marriage Matters with me, your host, Javaid Iqbal. We are joined today by a barrister, Camilla, Khawaja. Camilla, can you hear me? Hi, Camilla, can you hear me?
Yes.
Right, excellent. Thank you very much for joining us. Camilla is a barrister who specialises predominantly in family law and predominantly in matrimonial finances. Camilla, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Javaid, first, thank you very much for having me on your show.
It's a pleasure.
I'm very grateful to be given the opportunity to spread awareness of my work and also how people like you and I can potentially collaborate to avoid problems in the field of matrimonial finance. The topic that we are rather discussing today, it's fascinating because it is when marriage isn't recognised. So what I try to do in my practice, within which I specialise in matrimonial finance, it is to try to advise people so as to avoid the sort of problems that we're going to talk about tonight. But by way of an introduction, I have been a barrister since 1998. I am based in Watford and I run a practice called the Women's Lawyer. I work alongside my support, who is Humma Qureshi, who is tuning in. So hello to Humma and her family.
Hello, Humma.
Hello, Humma. And we work together to essentially support fathers who are seeking contact with their children, but also and predominantly dealing with Islamic law and all aspects of matrimonial finance.
Brilliant,
So
brilliant.
If there are any questions, Javaid, please feel free to ask.
No, I mean, 100%. I mean, this is what obviously we're going to talk about today. Now, on this show, I've talked a few times about marriages that are not recognised. Predominantly, I think the easiest way to put it is when you have your nikah read in this country, but you don't register that with a civil wedding. So you don't go down to the town hall or you don't register it. You've just had your nikah done, whether that's in the house or in a mosque or in a restaurant or in a hall, and it's just a nikah with an imam and that's it. Now, I understand there are some mosques in England that now obviously do the nikah and the civil ceremony at the same time. So they make you sign both the nikah register, which is obviously belongs to the mosque, and then they also make you do the civil ceremony as well. Now, what I want to get to, sort of the heart of the issue is when the marriage. So if I can go back to my examples, Tariq and Bushra. So Tariq and Bushra only had the nikah done. They've not had anything else. They're living together. 5 years down the line, they've got a little nipper, and they basically get divorced. They have the talaq, or they sort of separate. But, and this is a big but now, they own a house together, which they bought jointly, post nikah, post marriage. There's no recourse. They can't go down the divorce route because there is no marriage. Therefore, they can't apply for matrimonial finances, i.e. ancillary relief, using the Matrimonial Causes Act 1973, which governs divorce in this country. At that point, what do they do? Because the marriage is not recognised, but they own this house jointly, and neither of them are willing to shift now. The mum saying, Bushra saying, I'm not moving out, Tariq saying, I'm not moving out, but they want to sort out the finances, but they can't go down the court route.
But
what happens then?
The example that you've given is actually one that is relatively straightforward because they jointly own the property.
Yeah.
Now, the reality on the ground at grassroots level where you and I work, most of the time the property is in the sole name of the husband.
Yeah.
And if it were such that both properties were jointly owned, it is a relatively straightforward action to get an order for sale on the house and the proceeds split. You cannot, however, claim on things like your husband's pension. Yeah. You cannot claim on alternative or extra resources, rather, that you can if you were legally married. So the problem that we have is very few of our masjids are recognised as premises that have the licence to do the civil marriage. And our people still don't seem to appreciate the necessity for a civil marriage. And Javaid, that affects mostly women.
Absolutely. And I've talked about this many, many times on this show before, that for some reason, and I think, you know, in the whole hubbub of getting married and, you know, we're going to live together, they forget the most essential thing is my marriage legal? Is it recognized in this country?
Yes. And if it isn't, and they have 3 children, for example. Now, a new phenomenon I'm seeing more often, indeed, Huma and I saw it today, is that gentlemen are getting married a second and a third time without having legally married number 1 wife, and they are having nikahs with wife number 2 and so forth. But the reality is that wife 1, who perhaps has the children with him, has very little recourse against him.
Absolutely.
For the property that Javaid, she may well have worked the entire marriage.
We've seen that. Yeah, we've seen that so many times. So in terms of going back to the original example, so you're saying that that's a relatively simple forward procedure.
Simple. The action is not under Matrimonial Causes Act 1973. No. It's under Talata with Trusts of Trustees and Land Act 1996. So what you would do is under Section 14, Section 15 of Talata, the husband or wife, or the Mr. or Mrs., they would make an application for an order for sale on that property, and they would get half if they owned it as half.
Yeah.
For example, as a joint tenant or a tenant in common. But Javaid, those examples, or the couple, that you're referring to,
Tariq and Bushra.
Sorry?
Tariq and Bushra.
Oh, Tariq and Bushra. Okay. So Tariq and Bushra are fortunate because their interests are recognized in that they jointly own this property. Now, let's go back a bit and say they've got 3 children and Bushra is not on the mortgage and she's not on the deeds of the house. The husband goes and marries wife number 2, or he just disappears. What does she then do? That's the fundamental question. And what we need is for our community to recognize, in order to protect children, we absolutely need for the wives to have the protection of a civil marriage. Now, Javaid, it's not just when you're married and you separate. They don't have rights as a widow if the husband were to die.
Well, there is no marriage, so technically she's not a sort of widow. If I can just roll back a little bit more, when you went back, we were just talking about Talata. Now, in my experience, is what I find is Talata, although it works, the costs of that can be quite prohibitive. It's very, I mean, if anybody's obviously watching thinking, oh, I'm going to be fine even if I don't register my marriage because I can go down the Talata route, it is very, very expensive. It can run into, well, it all depends on what you're claiming. So obviously, if you've got a house worth £300,000 and the equity, is £300,000, you're effectively claiming £150,000. The cost of the application.
You don't have to be claiming just 150,000. You know, going back to your example, let's say Bushra has never worked.
Yeah.
Let's say she's been a stay-at-home mum, so she doesn't work, so she doesn't have a mortgage raising capacity.
Yeah. So
what you would do is potentially bring a claim under the Children Act 1989. It's called Schedule 1.
Yep.
You would bring a claim in conjunction with the Talata claim, so you would potentially secure more of the equity of the 300,000. So Javaid, in situations like that, they need to come and see you, or they need to come and see me.
Absolutely. But just to point out that the Children's Act Section 1 only covers housing needs and needs of the children, not necessarily of the wife, because there is no wife.
Yeah, Schedule 1.
Schedule 1 of the CA 89, yeah.
Exactly, and only the children.
Only the children.
Very difficult for some of my clients to understand that they have been married, Islamically married, for 15 years, 18 years. But Javaid, it's heartbreaking to actually tell them you are just a cohabitant.
Yeah, there's actually nothing there. There's no legal rights, there's no legal recourse.
So when you explain that their rights come through the children, that is, that is a bit of an eye-opener, and they think, but no, I'm a common law wife. I've been with him 4 or 5 years.
Common law wife does not exist, and I've been saying this till I'm blue in the face. There's no such thing as common law wife or common law husband. I don't know where this myth came from or who sort of started this little thing of common law, because I get this a lot, because they say, oh, but I'm a common law, and I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? Legally, there is no legal definition of common law husband or common law partner or common law wife. Either you're married or you're not married. Either it's legally recognized or it's not legally recognized. There's no in between, basically.
No, and I think that, it's not just a question of women protecting themselves and, and thinking about future children. It's also about doing things whereby you're entitled to certain social security benefits as a wife. You're entitled to bereavement benefits as a wife. You have property rights as a wife. You have pension sharing rights as a wife. And it is so important for our people to recognize that the duty is incumbent upon them to say, I want to clarify, if, for example, you got married in Pakistan or in Bangladesh and that marriage was recognized there, that nikah was recognized there, that's legally binding here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you live in Watford, as I do, or you live in Ilford, then you must either do the nikah in a registered building, which it has the license to do the civil marriage, or Javaid, they have to do it separately.
Yeah, in a thing, the register office. I mean, one of the key things I always tell my clients is get your marriage registered, because for one of the main things is obviously, benefits is number one. And then he's also got sort of tax rebates as well. You can use each other's tax allowance. So yes. Those are one of the main reasons. Camilla, stay there. We're going to just take a short break, and then inshallah we'll be back after the break and we'll continue speaking about this. We'll see you on the other side. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Do you need help with your marriage? Do you suspect infidelity in your marriage? Are you struggling to gain the truth over a matter of concern? Whatever the concern, we're here to try and help. Email us for free support today at marriagematters@britishmuslim.tv.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Marriage Matters with me, your host, Javaid Iqbal. I'm still in discussions with Camilla, who's kindly joined us this evening. Camilla, you still there?
Yes.
Right, what if, and I get this a lot, you have people with various religious beliefs, let's just say, or a religious disposition. What they may say is, listen, we want to have our nikah done, but for whatever reason, we don't want to register it. How would they go about trying to protect themselves? And again, especially the women in the majority of the scenarios, what would you suggest to them is, okay, fine, if you don't want to register it, then do this, 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 and this?
Yeah, I would say that if it comes to property, or when it rather comes to property, that they ought to be registered as a joint owner on that property. Because when we go back to Tariq and Bushra is going to be all right. Bushra's worst case scenario is she gets 50% of that 300,000 you were talking about.
Exactly.
If Bushra wasn't on the deeds, Javaid, of that property, then she would be in a real problem, and she would be spending, depending on who she goes to for legal advice, she'd be spending thousands on a talata application.
Yeah.
So the answer to your question would be, if you are, I don't understand why someone would be against the civil marriage. It is certainly not against our faith.
Yeah, it's just people have different views on, I'm married Islamically, therefore I'm married, in the eyes of the Lord. I'm married, yeah, rightly so. But obviously within this country, if you want to legalize it, or you certainly want recourse to the courts or to the sort of justice system, it needs to be legalized. But a lot of people have that view where they say, no, I don't want it. I'm against it for whatever reason. But then, like you said, they still need to protect their interest.
They need to protect their interest, not just in life, but also in death.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's so important. There are so many spousal benefits and rights that, for example, that the wife might have through her work, which would only go to a spouse. It's not just about recourse through the courts. I mean, if there is a legal dispute, then of course you would go to the courts. But going to court, Javaid, you and I both know it's very stressful.
Okay.
It's not just the expense, it's very stressful. And it is, it is so important that our people, if they can, for example, let me give you an example, it'd be easier. With regards to the meher, the money is defined at the time of the nikah. How do you get that if you don't start legal proceedings? And even when you do start legal proceedings, what is the foundation for that claim? Is it breach of contract? Is it connected to the potential talata claim? It is so difficult, and we certainly in some of the marriages that I've seen, they stipulate these inflated sums at the meher time. Certainly the more affluent families do, in my experience. But on the ground,
nothing's happening.
No.
Yeah. We again, I say this a lot as well, where they'll promise you heaven on earth on the nikah nama in the sort of meher section, but when it actually comes down to it. But what, in your experience, why do you think people are so resistant? I mean, I know the answer, but I'm asking for your view in terms of why they're so resistant in not registering their marriage.
I think that we only think about law or legal rights and duties when we are in a predicament and when we are at a disadvantage and when we are in trouble, because people generally don't like speaking to me, for example, unless they need to. Nobody goes to see a barrister unless they are in absolute need.
Yeah.
So, and actually, some of us, Javaid, they're actually very lovely people, just so you know. So sorry.
No, I agree with you. I'm just being facetious. I've met, obviously, barristers. I've worked with them very, very closely, and most of them are very nice people, and they actually give good advice. I mean, I think the law industry, the legal industry, has got a bit of reputation for everybody's a shark and everybody's out to make as much money as you can. In my experience, having been in the law for sort of now on 15, 16 years, I'm not saying there aren't people out there. There are, trust me. But the majority I've met, they will give you sound advice. So I think I have to defend the profession there with you.
Javaid, I work with my little sister, Nadia Raphael, and she is an exemplary solicitor and an example of how, I know, of course, I'm biased, but she is an example of how the justice system ought to operate. And she will assist and advise exactly the same way Huma and I do. We have a fantastic team. We have Lucy, we have Liz, we have Nikki, we have Melinda. We have a brilliant team. And we work collectively to try to make it as less stressful as possible. But
That's the key, isn't it?
Absolutely, but the point is, let's try to be preventative rather than coming to somebody like myself and fighting over, let's say, 300,000, but spending 75,000 on legal fees, which is not unusual for a talata case. So if we were, why do that? Why not think that, yes, Allah recognizes the marriage? Of course, that is the most fundamental. I understand that. I got married on the Sunday Islamically. I got married, civil marriage, the following day.
Yeah.
In my own personal circumstance. So what I'm trying to say is that the reason why people don't do it, I think, is because they think we are recognized as married in the eyes of God, and that is enough. It is the same principle with prenuptial agreements.
Yeah.
They're now legally recognised in England, as are some post-nuptial agreements. But in reality, Javaid, the nikah is a prenup. It is in my view.
Is the prenup recognised across the board? Like, is it because if you have a prenup, it's 100% recognised?
No, it doesn't mean it's 100% recognised.
That's what I was coming to, because from my understanding, is obviously certain things are taken into account. When it was done, the sort of parties, whether it's sort of legal advice, whether on sort of balance it's fair, etc. So I think just to put that out there with the viewers, think, because, you don't want someone who's got like £3 million in Switzerland going, right, let's draw a prenup, you sign that, job's a good one. there is many caveats to that and many sort of elements to signing a prenup and a postnup as well.
Yes, absolutely. Duress is one of the most common examples. There was a client that I'm dealing with now, and a very, very affluent husband, and the prenup was put to her, I think, the day before the wedding. And everything was ready to go. And of course, you're not going to then say, I'm signing it. So I think with the nikah, what I meant was you have a definitive figure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is the meher. So it's the meher Islamically, it's consideration under English law. So it would be the figure that would be given to the wife in the event of a divorce. So that's what I mean when I say that it is akin rather to a prenuptial agreement. So the answer to your question, or I'm terribly sorry, it's a very long answer, but the answer is that our people don't understand the significance of legal rights, and it's women that are mainly suffering. So I think we need to educate the new generation. We need to educate all of the young, people who are going to get married. Javaid, on that note, can I just say, my son Aman, his friends are watching this show. It's their first time watching British Muslim TV. So can I just do a shout out to all the Merchant Taylor's boys who are watching this? Thank you for watching Aman's mum. I know it's probably very boring, but thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for watching. What was it? The Merchant Boys?
Merchant Taylor Boys, yeah.
Merchant Taylor Boys. Thank you very much for watching us. I hope you're taking all this in, and I hope you're learning something as well. So
yeah, and much the same with girls. It's not just about girls. I'm talking about women mainly, but it's about our boys. It's about our sons recognizing that they need to do the right thing when they consider marriage.
And just to sort of clarify, is even if you had your nikah done and you've been together for 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 30 years, you can register your marriage at any time. It doesn't have to be at the time of the nikah. You can do it. You can do it, years later.
Yes.
So I mean, just to sort of, because I had my registry done, I don't know, I think years after I had my nikah done.
Yes.
So you can get it at any time.
The gentleman that came into our offices today, he was Islamically married in '98 and then did the Islamic marriage in 2014.
Yeah. So it's still recognised.
Absolutely. And he did it because he felt that it would give his wife more security.
All right, brilliant. Camilla, thank you very much again. And we're just going to go to a small break, and we'll see you after that. We'll see you on this side. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Do you need help with your marriage? Do you suspect infidelity in your marriage? Are you struggling to gain the truth over a matter of concern? Whatever the concern, we're here to try and help. Email us for free support today at marriagematters@britishmuslim.tv.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Marriage Matters with me, your host, Javaid Iqbal. Now, we're still in discussions with Camilla, who's a barrister operating out of Watford with the company, The Women's Lawyer. Now, Camilla, we spoke earlier about, obviously, what happens if a marriage is not registered and what are the legal routes, etc., etc. Now, let's jump to the other side of the fence. Now, let's say the marriage is registered. Let's say the marriage is legal. They've gone through the divorce process. They've got the decree nisi, and they're waiting, or they've already got the decree absolute. Now, how does the court split the assets? What do the court take into consideration? What are the priorities? And not so much the procedure, but what can people expect? Because I get a lot of people and they have sort of really unrealistic expectations. So, you'll have people coming, I'll have wives coming in saying, I want 100% of the house because I've got 4 kids and I want 100% of the house and I've looked after it for 20 years and we did an extension and I was doing this, and the husband will come in and say, oh no, but I've been paying the mortgage. So in terms of what considerations the court give, we can sort of touch upon that.
Javaid, thank you for the question. I'm first of all very happy that Bushra and Tariq are now married.
Bushra and Tariq are legally married. I went to their wedding. I'm a witness.
And oh, wow. Okay, great.
It was a small do. I got invited. I had to go.
You didn't invite me, mate.
I'm really sorry about that, Camilla. I think you were busy doing your talata for people who weren't married.
Yeah, I was preoccupied. I'm so sorry. So let's say Bushra came to see Humma and I, and she says, this is, it is a, first of all, a long marriage. We have a few children. I earn, let's say, 27,000. My husband earns 50,000. I work part-time. I have made a very valid contribution to the marriage, albeit with my part-time income. And my needs are such that I need to stay in this property because my boys, or my children rather, are doing GCSEs and A-levels. It's all entirely fabricated, Javaid, but what the courts will look at is what are Bushra's needs. And they are capital needs. Capital needs means housing needs and income needs. So, for example, we may look at, let's look at housing needs first. So we may say that if this property is sold and Bushra has predominant care of the children, she may secure 60% or 65% of matrimonial assets or equity rather in the family home. In rare circumstances, Javaid, she might get 67 to 70%. There are cases like that. I have done cases like that, but they are not particularly common. 60 to 65%, however, I'm sure you know from your own practice that it does happen if needs prescribe.
Absolutely.
So what we would then look at is a potential for spousal maintenance. So we would say the husband's earning considerably more than the wife, and to equalise their income needs, there may be an element of spousal maintenance. Now, it's really important, Javaid, for your viewers to recognise that the courts in England very much like a clean break. So as much as possible, they try to get away from spousal maintenance.
Absolutely. Sorry to interrupt you. For you to explain what a clean break is, for anybody who doesn't obviously understand what that is.
A clean break is a circumstance where there is no spousal maintenance being paid from wife to husband or husband to wife.
So they just walk away with what they've got and that's it. They don't need to speak to each other with regards to the finances ever again.
No, only with regards to the children.
With the children, absolutely.
And maintenance would be paid by the non-resident parent. So another case I'm dealing with at the moment, both sons live with their father. The father lives very, very close to their senior school. So the boys are doing their GCSEs. They want to be near their dad, living with their dad near the school. So the mother is the non-resident parent. So she has had to, with her gross income, go on the child maintenance calculator and work out, based on the number of nights the boys are with her, she has to work out what to give the father who is the resident parent, if you like, and she's the non-resident parent. So let's summarise. You mentioned earlier the most important legislation in divorce, which is Section 25 of the Matrimonial Causes Act. Now, that prescribes subsections A to G, which gives us the law that barristers and solicitors and people like yourself, Javaid, who were advising, we implement A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If anyone wants to look it up, they can look it up. And they give us a guideline. So they will look at the duration of the marriage, the needs of the children. They will look at the needs of the lesser earning party. They will look at the earning capacity. Now, earning capacity is a huge thing. And to be honest, in the start of my practice, I didn't really appreciate the significance of earning capacity. What it basically means is how much someone can earn if they push themselves.
Yeah.
And there is a legal obligation upon them to do that.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of men, unfortunately, will be earning, let's say, 150,000. And by the time they come to see me, they're earning 25 grand.
Seen that before. I'll be honest with you, I've seen it very recently.
Yeah. So, it's about coming to court or coming to the law with what we call clean hands. as much as possible, you know, look at what needs the children have as paramount. Look at where do they need to live. Now, rental is an unfortunate reality for a lot of parents, but it puts predominantly mothers in a vulnerable situation. So we have a procedure called a measure.
A measure order.
That measure order will facilitate the mother remaining in the property until such time as the youngest child reaches majority 18, and then the property will be sold. But Javaid, that takes care of the children. But then what about the mother who has been working part-time? What about the fact that her pension will be significantly smaller because of that, because of her capacity? We are trained, I think, indeed, as was I, to always, I think, give precedence to the husband and to his role and to his earning capacity and to his income. And I am extremely strong believer and advocate that, you know, girls should try as much as possible to have an earning capacity, even if they aren't earning.
Yeah, absolute must.
You know, there are brilliant young girls. Humma's daughter, Anaya, and I hope she's watching. Anaya is hoping to read medicine and extremely bright. So that will give Anaya the platform to do whatever she wants to do and solidify her own position, her own independence, exactly the same as what I did.
We've been advocating. I mean, on the show we had a girl called Serish, and she was the same. She was advocating that every single woman, even if you're not going to use it, have the earning capacity, have financial freedom, have the financial independence.
Absolutely.
And that's what you want.
Be wise. Absolutely. You know, be wise, be clued up, think about what you're doing. Yeah. Think about what you're putting, for example, all your savings into a property with your husband. Is your name going to be on the deeds?
Yeah. And if it's not, then, you know, you're in trouble.
If it's not, and you're not married, it's a minefield, Javaid, trying to do a paper trail going back.
All the way back 15 years, possibly.
Exactly.
And obviously, we know the sort of conveyancing files are only kept for, is it for, I think, 14 years, I think, conveyancing files. Sometimes they don't even exist.
It's 7 or 9 years.
So let me ask you one question, which I get a lot in my sort of working life is, I'll have a husband and a wife. So the wife, again, like you said, sometimes they don't have that earning capacity. They might be working 10 hours a week, 8 hours a week because they've been bringing up the kids. Now, the husband, let's say the house is worth 150 grand. It's got a mortgage of 90 grand. They've got 60 grand equity. Sometimes what happens is the husband will turn around and say, keep the house. I don't want anything from the house. It's on joint names. Now, the problem we have is the wife doesn't have mortgage raising capacity. Now, even if the husband is willing to give that house over, to say, okay, you can keep the house, keep all the equity in that. She doesn't want to sell it, but she doesn't have mortgage raising capacity, and the husband wants his name off the house. Now, we get this a lot. So in that scenario, in your experience, what would happen?
It's a very difficult scenario, because if you don't have the mortgage borrowing capacity, then of course you can't take the mortgage over and indemnify the husband against the mortgage, which in simple terms is remove him from the mortgage and take over the entirety of the mortgage. And if he's insisting that that be done, the only way to do it is to sell the house and take the entirety of the proceeds. And Javaid, sometimes I feel sorry for men because they get married in good faith. Yeah. For whatever reason, the marriage didn't work out. All of their investment, if you like, is in that one property. And when you go to the courts, of course, the judges have to think about the children first. And perhaps 8 times out of 10, those children are with the mother. So it's not fair on the husbands that therefore end up renting a room or a studio, because I see that all the time.
I've seen that a lot.
The women can, you know, I am an advocate for women's rights, and my practice is called the Women's Lawyer, and I also run a general practice as well, helping men and women, because I can see the injustice that several men suffer, and they will literally wash their hands off the situation and say, I've had enough, because...
Take it.
Yeah, take it.
Take it.
But
I've seen that so many times. And I think a lot... Because I think what happens in a lot of these cases is, certainly in my experience anyway, is both parties start off with a lot of sort of vigor and a lot of sort of fire and anger. And as things progress and as real life kicks in, as an sort of emotions sort of calm down, they realize that, you know what, maybe it's just, you know, it is for the kids, take it. But then one of my major issues is, how is the wife going to take it? Because, again, like you said, if she hasn't got mortgage raising capacity, she hasn't got, and sometimes there's not enough equity in the house that even if you sold it, you could rehouse her. Because if you've got equity of 40, 50 grand, she can't raise it and she can't sell it, take the 40, 50 and rehouse herself. So you're in that catch-22, and it's mainly a measure order. But, again, if the husband doesn't agree to a measure order, because he obviously wants his name off the mortgage, there's nothing you can do. Camilla, stay there. We'll come back for the last segment. And what we're going to do is just take a quick short break. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk a bit more with Camilla about finances, about marriage, about everything. We'll see you on the other side. Take care, inshallah. We'll see you in a short while. Assalamu alaikum.
Do you need help with your marriage? Do you suspect infidelity in your marriage? Are you struggling to gain the truth over a matter of concern? Whatever the concern, we're here to try and help. Email us for free support today at marriagematters@britishmuslim.tv.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the final segment of Marriage Matters with me, your host, Javaid Iqbal. We're still in discussion with Camilla. Now, Camilla, what's happened is in the last sort of 45 minutes or so, we've thrown out loads of information and we've used loads of terminology that some people will get, some people won't. We obviously will, we're in the profession. But let's just sort of go back and explain to people what some of the terminology is. So when you said Children's Act, what did you mean by, what is the Children's Act?
The Children Act of 1989, Javaid, is the most important legislation with regards to the welfare of the children. And Section 8 is the section that is referred to when one is making an application for contact with their child. So that act, it looks at all the different orders that are applicable to children. So, for example, if you want to stop your husband or wife taking the child out of the jurisdiction means out of England and Wales. Yep. So if, for example, you're worried that they could abduct your child, you would apply for what's called a prohibited steps order. If you were worried that the mother was getting the daughter or son an injection that you didn't want them to have, for example, you would apply for a specific issue order, or if it was with regards to a specific school. Contact is the fundamental issue when you're looking at the Children Act. And the other important point is when you're looking at maintenance of the children, that is Schedule 1, financial maintenance. And that
still comes under the Children's Act, but Schedule 1, Children's Act 1989.
Yes.
All right, yes. Excellent. Now, you mentioned Talata as well, just brief, because you kind of really quickly told us what Talata was. What is it again, and what does it cover?
Talata is the 1996 legislation that covers cohabitational breakdown.
Okay, sorry, let's stop there. Let's just pause there. What's cohabitational before we move forward, so we can put it into a sort of thingy context?
Anyone who has done a nikah and not a civil marriage, they are in a cohabitational relationship.
Okay.
Would be if you were essentially unmarried and living with someone. And that type of relationship is becoming far and more common in England and Wales. A lot of people now are opting not to get married, but to live together. So the cohabitational status is increasing significantly, which is really worrying, not just for for Muslims, not just for those who have done the niqab, but for everybody who has decided that, let's say they're engaged, for example, but they are not married. So that is a cohabitant, and the law that governs cohabitational breakdown is Talata 1996.
Right, excellent. And then obviously moving on, we mentioned the Matrimonial Causes Act in 1973. Now, what is that and what does it cover?
Now, the Matrimonial Causes Act 73 is, of course, over 50 years old now, and it is, or almost 50 years old, and it is legislation that governs the financial division of assets upon a divorce. And the predominant section in that is section 25. It is, Javaid, it's really important to highlight that there is a lot of information online, because since the legal aid cuts came in 2013, you and I know has had an awful impact on our family courts. But what the government did was they started producing documents. Certainly the Ministry of Justice have started producing documents that help litigants in person. So you can go online and you can go onto websites.
Sorry, what's a litigant in person? Because we have to, I mean, me and you obviously are different in terms of we're in the profession, but there'll be a lot of people watching who absolutely have no idea what some of these sort of words are, these sort of terminology. So, we have to break it down, really break it down.
Sorry, Javaid, the litigants in person are people who are unrepresented. So
they don't have a solicitor or they don't have a barrister with them.
Okay. Yeah.
They're just doing it on their own, and they can do it on their own as well. That's hence the sort of litigants, i.e., someone in litigation in person. There's nobody else sort of.
They don't have the support of lawyers, and they are self-representing. And it is most unfortunate that in the courts you see that the terminology used is exactly the same as you and I use. The procedure, the court timetable, the structure, all of it is designed to alienate people.
Yeah.
It is, and it's so unfortunate because they go in, they don't understand what is a first appointment, what is an FDR, what is a final hearing, what does it mean?
What's the federal, what's the directions appointment, review hearing, PTR, these, yeah.
That's what I was about to say, pre-trial review. So the reality is that as much as we talk about, legal aid has been, for all intents and purposes abolished, and therefore we've implemented all these guides for litigants in person, the reality is that they need guidance from somebody like yourself in order to navigate the system. I mean, a lot of the words are in Latin.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we see that a lot. I mean, I kind of remember my early days, and a lot of it was in Latin. You're just kind of looking at each other going, I'm not, you can't even try to make it out. And this was sort of pre-Google or pre-internet days where you'd have to think, there's ex parte I remember quite well.
Yeah.
When the first time I ever did an ex parte application, and I was like, well, what, you're kind of looking around. So these terminologies, obviously, people who are in the legal profession get them, but I can understand, and I've seen it with my own eyes, my own experience, that people who aren't used to going to court, they've never been exposed to that sort of world, they get completely overwhelmed. They get over, because what traditionally happens, in my experience, is people come to you and they have an absolute brain, their mind is chocker full of information. And all they want to do is just basically tell you everything all at once. And it's almost like a verbal diarrhea dumping on your desk, and they go, well, he did this, she did this, and this happened. And it's all, and I always say to my clients, think of it as a train track. As we're going along, there'll be a box, and you can put that, what you've just told me, in that box, and you can put that one in that box. But you can't, we always say the wheels of justice turn very slowly. Some of these cases, Talata, I've had financial cases that have been going on for 3 years. And people want everything quick. They want to be like, oh no, I want the house and I want it tomorrow, and I know what I want, and boom. And it can take, we always say to people, if you can avoid going to court, try to avoid going to court. That's why now they've set up sort of mediation services. They've set up, loads of other stuff. But if you have to go to court, don't think it's going to be a cakewalk. Don't think it's going to be A, cheap, and B, it's going to take 2 weeks.
No, I think that, people are very hesitant to pay lawyers, but they don't understand that we study for very many years to qualify, to run a practice, to develop a practice, which I have been doing on a single-handed basis for the last decade. It is extremely difficult to build up a speciality. Javaid, when I first qualified, and certainly when I started the Women's Lawyer initially, I did a lot of work because you don't have the luxury of being able to specialize. Yeah. So as the years have moved on, I've been able to say I'm only dealing with matrimonial finance and collaborating with British Muslim TV, singlemuslim.com, and now the British Muslim magazine. By collaborating with them and having an exposure that I didn't have previously, I started to do a lot more talata. So that enables you to learn these situations backwards and sideways.
Absolutely. But not only that, I think for me, certainly, it's also the education part, it's knowing the part. But the most important thing sometimes is the people walking through your door. You will have, for me, every case is different. Every scenario is different. There's always a little tweak in the personality is different sort of, I always say to my children, certainly, I say, listen, for me at work, no 2 days are the same, ever. I've never had 2 days that are the same. People come in and you learn from their experiences and you take from that and you kind of look at things slightly differently every time.
Javaid, to do the job that we do requires a huge degree of humility.
Absolutely.
To have that capacity to handhold, to have the capacity to be understanding. And alhamdulillah, I've been very blessed that in my work, I have been able to support mothers, I've been able to support fathers, I've been able to advise on very complicated disclosure issues. Disclosure is a very important word where you're not getting all of the financial information from the other side. So we've had to get the Indian High Commission involved. I've had cases and still have in Nigeria. So these sort of international cases expose you to a different dynamic. Where
different cultures, different people, different ways of living, different ways of thought even. The way you'll speak to a client and you'll say, oh, but it's like this, and they'll say, no. But, because of our community or because of our culture, I want it a certain way. And, you can advise them, but they're ultimately going to, they have to make, like say, they give instructions. Yes. That's why they all say, don't they? I will take instructions.
Some of the time, your analogy of putting information in certain boxes as you sort of travel down the litigation route, it's a beautiful analogy, and I think that it's something that needs to be, one hopes, understood by our clients who are seeking our help.
No, absolutely. Now, Camilla, you said you wanted to. I'm going to give you 10 seconds max. You said you wanted to do some shout outs.
Say thank you. Aidan's at home watching. So is Fareen and Jewel. So is Humma and her family, Nadia and her family, Liz and Lucy. Thank you for moving the table today. And Aman is upstairs. Shout out to the Merchant Taylors boys again. I think I've covered everyone, Javaid.
Sorry, yeah, I follow. I just kind of I went out for a bite of tea. I just got back. Are you still there? All right, brilliant, Camilla. Thank you so much for appearing on our show. It's been an absolute pleasure and very, very informative, obviously, what you've told us and the viewers at home. I wish you all the best and all the success for the future. And inshallah, I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That was Camilla, and we thank her for appearing on the show. Just to let you know that this is my last show for this season. So inshallah, I will be, hopefully, back soon, everything permitting. But thank you for watching, and I hope the programs that we've actually put out in the last sort of 3-4 months have been informative and helpful. Be nice to each other. Be kind to each other. Life's difficult. Hold on to the rope of Islam, and inshallah, everything will be okay. Inshallah, I will see you soon. Take care of each other. Assalamu alaikum. I'm signing out.
Do you need help with your marriage? Do you suspect infidelity in your marriage? Are you struggling to gain the truth over a matter of concern? Whatever the concern, we're here to try and help. Email us for free support today at marriagematters@britishmuslim.tv.